Start recording. Cool. Right. So, and you should probably mute your Twitch if you have it there. Huh? Okay. Cool. Okay, my computer is only a little bit trying to fly away, but that's okay. Welcome. Okay, so do like you do the small talk stuff, Alexandra. Now go.
Okay, but I'm confused.
What
I'm
did you,
not good with small talk. Eva, you know how I'm not good with small talk.
what did you have for dinner?
I said I'm not good with small talk. Hang on.
Well, let's. Excellent. Okay, so.
All right.
good. So we have a couple of people on live. Cool. So we'll just wait a couple of minutes for everyone to come, and then we'll start the informal chat about Rails Girls Summer of Code. So throughout this chat, we'll be referring to it as RGSoC, because otherwise it's just too long. Rails Girls Summer of Code. But briefly, it's this is a 3-month scholarship program, and hey, and and if you can tell me if the sound is okay and the video quality is okay, that would be very helpful. But yeah, so RGSoC is a 3-month scholarship program that takes place during the summer, which is great. It's a full-time thing, but you can also do a part-time program. And Alexandra and I, top-notch, awesome. Alexandra and I were both involved in RGSoC in one capacity or the other. So I did it 2 summers ago, so maybe 18 months ago. And Alexandra, when were you doing it?
I've done it twice. So I was part of the first one, but so then I didn't actually contribute to the actual program running, and then I was the year after, and I think then I skipped the year, and then I was the year afterwards. I would have to check the T-shirts actually to know. I don't remember from the top of my head.
Cool.
I wasn't in the year where Eva was doing it. I'm pretty sure.
Yes, but curiously enough, Alexandra and I are working together. So I'm actually Alexandra's manager, so she better be on her best behavior today.
She's my minion. Eva's my minion. I'm very pleased with my ability to hire great people. Right?
Awesome. Yes.
So
cool. So yeah, I think we'll just start now. I did the RGSoC 18 months ago, and it was a really cool experience for me, because I'm a completely self-taught web developer. So I went the internship route. So after self-studying for a year or so, mostly like free code camp and projects and tutorials and Udemy and stuff like that, I was looking for something more hands-on and something that would require teamwork. And then just luckily, I think actually it was in doing a Django Girls workshop, someone mentioned this thing, the Rails Girls Summer of Code, which so this is also one of the reasons that I wanted to have this conversation, is because I feel not a lot of people know about RGSoC. And it's a shame because it's a really terrific program, and it's organized every year, and it can make just a really big change for you and your career. But yeah, so today we're going to focus a bit more on the application process, because right now the applications are open, and they're open until the end of March. And the program, as I said, starts in the summer. So right now you apply, then your applications are reviewed, and then the whole program takes place in July, August, and September. You want to add anything to that, Alex?
No, I can talk a bit about my motivation why I want to do this, or why I was involved in the RGSoC in the first place.
Cool.
So in 2013, when the program started, I was like waiting for going into labor, and I was bored out of my brain. But I have been contributing to KDE, which is like the ancient Linux desktop environment, for a while, and I've seen that like the Google Summer of Code was a good idea, but it had quite a high bar of people getting into it. But I could also see that the ones who got into the program really learned a lot, and they contributed with valuable things. And so I found, I don't remember actually, as like all of this 2013 summer is a blur, but I found out about RGSoC somehow and thought like this was a great idea because it would give beginners the opportunity to get into this and like use the opportunity to learn while contributing to open source projects, which is accidentally how I learned everything I know, because I started contributing to KDE because I wanted to learn about how is software built basically, and I learned tons while I did that. So, and I was blank, right? So I knew nothing. So I thought that was a really great initiative, and which is why I got involved in this. That being said, I'm a terrible programmer, so I couldn't do any kind of like hands-on programming help or mentoring in that sense. But I did do supervisor, which I, by the way, I think is a terrible term. So it's more like a cheerleader, team lead type of person, liaison or something you want to call that. It's not meant to actually watch you. It's meant to help you during the program. And then 1 year I actually did some coaching for someone who was trying to get into like more UX design and interaction design of things. So like the designy part of front end. There I could actually coach because that's what I did at that point.
Cool.
Yeah.
Before we continue, if anyone has any questions, there is a chat thingy on Twitch. So that's the best way to kind of ask us. So I will be like glancing at our chat screen from time to time. But like you mentioned beginner, like that this is a program for beginner. And I think especially when you're self-taught, it's very difficult to know like when you're ready, when is the right time for you to start looking for an internship or I don't know, like even a junior dev job or something like that. Because like especially if you don't go through the bootcamp way and you're just you, and then you go online and you see all these people that like, I studied for 3 months and now I work full time, and you've been there studying for a year and you still feel like you're forgetting more than you're learning. So in your experience, what do you think, like who is RGSoC for? Like what kind of level of like technical skills, what kind of background, what kind of experience should people have to apply for RGSoC, you think?
I think that's a really tough question. So I can talk from my own experience. So when I decided to jump into contributing to open source in KDE, I had been kind of deep diving into community management, which these days is called developer relations or advocacy or whatever, for about a year. And I was at the point where I was like, okay, now I have to get out of that theory and start using it to actually solidify what I learned on my own. And also about like understand my models of how software communities worked and how software developers work together. In that sense, so you have to get into the point where you're not just learning anymore, but where you actually have learned enough to see like, okay, now it's time to jump into this and figure out what that means in practice when I start doing it, to solidify your understanding. But then again, so from the Google Summer of Code, which I had been watching before, if your fan is exploding.
Yeah, such is the reality.
So there were there are a lot of like these more Linux-based or like what I call like fossil type of open source, which required understanding and knowledge in C and C++. So there you probably have to know a lot more than what RGSoC Summer of Code tries to do.
Yeah.
But you have to be to the point where you actually know enough to do something and not just be learning.
Yeah.
Because then it's difficult, I believe.
I think in their application they state that you need to have kind of 1 year track record of continuous learning. And I would say that, yeah, it can be more or less than that. But what I think they are looking for, and what I think is important, is that they're looking for consistency. So they like people that, like, so for example, if you've been learning for 4 months, but you've been doing it every day and you have projects to support that, and if you have, I don't know, like, let's say you say, I want to learn JavaScript, and you've been learning JavaScript, and you apply for a JavaScript project, and like if you're very clear and structured in your programming path, I think you can always make a case for that as well. I think they don't, like, so as beginners, it's also very difficult to kind of know, like, do I need to learn JavaScript? Like, what's the best programming language I should learn? So I'm also guilty of kind of jumping from, you know, Python to JavaScript, from designing things to trying to learn databases. So like I think everyone has that in their experience. So, but I would say that, okay, 1 year maybe is a good kind of number. So for me it was around 1 year, but I would say maybe of that, like some of it was unstructured, some of it was just like checking in once a week, but some of it, especially when I was like, when I learned more and I knew what, like I had a better structure, I would be more focused. And I remember in my application, like that's what I was trying to convey, because there's, like for 100 people that say that they will start and learn, just a couple succeed. And I wouldn't say it has to do with the difficulty of programming, it's just simply the discipline of going back to it, learning, which is very, very difficult, especially when you're on your own and it's so easy to give up. But I think if you can prove that you're that kind of a person that says that they will do something and they do that, that is definitely something that will work in your favor, because RGSoC is completely remote, meaning that yes, you will need to meet with your buddy and your coaches, like physically, locally, but like the organization itself, like they will not know what you're doing day to day. So yes, of course, you will have to write like daily like log reports and stuff, but it's up to you. Like you have to take ownership of that journey and say, you know, I'll be doing this, I'll be studying that. And so yeah, I think that is definitely something, like a point that they're looking for. So are you a person that is committed to something? Are you a person that is disciplined enough to take ownership of your journey and not be like, okay, I need someone to look at me and tell me every day, okay, do this, have you done that, are you doing your homework, have you studied this is not your break time. So in RGSoC you won't get that kind of structure, which means that it's maybe not suitable for everyone, and that's why some people do prefer to go the bootcamp way, where it is a classroom environment and there is a teacher. But yeah, so that's just something to keep in mind, I think.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So it's you have to feel comfortable figuring out stuff on your own, basically, and to get up in the morning and find the motivation and sit down and say, like, I'm going to do this because I find this important enough to spend my time on it without somebody knocking on your door. So that's the reason I believe that they're looking for this kind of grit or experience, that you have to kind of prove that you're actually able to follow through with the program and don't fall off on week 2.5, basically.
Yeah. And we have a question about, do we really have to find a teammate before we can apply? So I would say yes, because again, so in my case, I did find a teammate from our local meetup, and I did also find, same way, the coaches. And again, this is something that will make your application stronger. So if you can prove that, again, you can take ownership of the whole learning journey that I mentioned. So if you can say, okay, me and my coding buddy, we're gonna apply for this project. We live in the same town. We have this coffee shop where we can meet at least once a week. Otherwise, we are both familiar. We have computers and internet, and we can meet through video software like this one, like Whereby. So if you can say things like that will make your application stronger. And similarly, if you can say, okay, we have a couple of coaches. So when we applied, we had 4 coaches. So the more the better, because different coaches will specialize in different things and will have a different amount of time for you. Because again, everyone's a volunteer. So yeah, I would say it's not, so it doesn't, I think when you apply, you have to apply with a buddy, but I think it will make your team that much better and your application that much stronger if you make an effort of getting to know this person, or like trying to find someone that you already, like, I think it helps if you do it with someone that you already know, because that again will mean that you're more likely to meet and work together, because it is 3 months, there's going to be problems, there's going to be issues, and it just helps if you have a bit of background and experience already. Cool. So I will read the questions in a bit. So Alexandra, what do you think makes for a good coach? So in RGSoC, the structure is the following. So you have your coding buddy. So that's just another person that has the same kind of tasks as you do. Then you have your local coaches. So those are people with technical skills, or hopefully skills that are relevant to the projects you're working at. Then you have the supervisors. So that's the kind of the link between your local team and the RGSoC organization. And then you have like the whole, like the big organization people that you can always talk to if you have any problems with a supervisor or coach or anything, any questions. So what do you think makes for a good coach? Like the coach that is, yeah.
Well, I think like there's 2 things to it. So once I think you have to find the right tone. So you need to like these people, because you will be kind of dependent on them, and you need to be comfortable to ask all the dumb questions that you feel you have. I think that is important, and it has to be someone who is like really interested in teaching and mentoring and coaching and like seeing you succeed. So, but that's like, I would say that's the baseline, but obviously they need to know, like they need to be competent in what you're trying to do. So if you do JavaScript, there should be people who know JavaScript and ideally work in JavaScript, so they can give you like this reality check of what is it really that you need to learn in the real world, and how does the job look like, and give you kind of this grounding in that sense that they know like, no, this is actually fine that you Google this, because I Google it every day as well. So these kind of things. But it's like, I think most important is that you feel comfortable with them and that you want to spend time with them in a quite intense period of time, because it's very packed. And if you don't feel like they're nice people, it's going to be miserable.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Even though sometimes you just don't know, I think in advance it's hard to say what's going to really happen. But I see a good question about the project, because so obviously you have different projects, different open source projects already listed on the RGSoC website, and people are asking whether they need to do any work beforehand, like does that make their application stronger, or what's the way to go there. So in my case, we applied for 2 projects, so like you can always do the first and second choice. Both of them were JavaScript Node related. So the first one, the one that we also got, was BAMI, a very cool project to do with low resource hospitals. And so I think the instructions are that try to contact the project owner, the project mentor, and see. So in our case, we just had to go on the forum and introduce ourselves. And like we didn't have to do like any work actually. Like we didn't like. I don't think you're supposed to do any pull requests or something like that. I think the idea is just that can you establish kind of like a connection with the mentor. Again, going back to the ownership and like saying like, okay, I want to really work with you on this project. So now prove it somehow. Like try to, maybe start reviewing community, the project community, because open source is all about community, right? So and like maybe ask a couple of questions, because you might also realize that maybe that project is not for you and that community is not for you, which is also good. So I think my advice here would be is not to be passive and not to be like, okay, I applied now, because like, so it should be okay, this is, so I would start with like, this is the tech stack, the skills that I would like to learn. Okay, so let's say I filter by Python projects and I find 5 projects, then I would go one by one, see maybe which topic is interesting for me, and then maybe see, because they will give you like a description of what you would need to implement. So in our case, we had to do, it was really, really cool because we had to do like a standalone, so yes, my cat would like to join this discussion. We had to do a standalone React application, which was really, really cool because I was just learning React. And instead of us trying to figure out how does this huge app work, which for beginners is quite intimidating, we had to do like a parallel app from scratch, making our own design choices and everything from beginning, which was really, really useful. And we just wrote a lot of code. And yeah, for me, that was really, really cool. But yeah.
Actually, hang on. That brings me to a point about the coaches. Ideally, they are people who have worked with junior developers before, because they will be able to help you scope your work. And that also comes to goes to the mentors of the project. So the open source projects, those who have the ownership of it, they will be able to find something that you can actually build and contribute to without having to understand everything and how everything hangs together, because that is just not feasible. So having like both these elements in there, I'm pretty sure that the mentors, like the open source projects, are pre-screened from the RGSoC like organization, like umbrella organization. But when you go look for coaches, make sure that you have actually someone who is able to coach and help juniors in scoping and understanding the work. And so it's not like this giant blob of work that you're supposed to deliver, and that they help you actually get from like in baby steps. Yeah. Because that's quite difficult in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, and also, so the project mentors those are the people that are in charge of the project, the open source project that you will be contributing to. And so they're also volunteers. I mean, normally they get a couple of hours, I think it's 8 hours or something, from their company, like supposedly just to help you, but I don't think that's really true. Like they just do it. Yeah, they might just be doing on top of it, like in the evenings. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they are not experienced as well as mentors. So maybe you will be the first team that will be working with them, like the first true beginners, which is, again, something that you can kind of maybe get a temperature of as you in your first interactions with the mentors. So if you're someone that maybe needs someone more experienced or a different mentoring type, yeah, that's also something to pay attention to. So we, again, were really lucky. So we had we had 2 mentors, but like one was really available to us, and he would be helping us whenever we were stuck. We had also so what helped us as well was to have some sort of structure, to have weekly meetings with this person and weekly meetings with that person, and that would just help us set that schedule, because when you work remotely and when you're kind of self-organized, it's very easy to start postponing things and forgetting things, and then it just kind of becomes quite murky.
Which is also something that your supervisor is supposed to help you sort out.
Yes. Yeah, so you will, the supervisor, we had weekly calls with our supervisor, and that was always really good, just saying, how was your week? Are there any issues? Are you struggling with something? And that could be very, I don't know, it could be motivation, or I have, because there's people will still have other obligations, because you're not supposed to just, ideally you would put your life on pause for 3 months, but realistically you still have a life, you still have a family, you still have, I don't know, a job or a part-time job. So probably you will have to kind of arrange your studying working hours around that as well, even though you are supposed to be available for 40 hours. So if you're, I think there are 2, they're again offering 2 scholarships, so a full-time one, which is 40 hours, and then a part-time one, which expects you to work 20 hours a week. But yeah, so you should be available for these 40 hours, which again, when you learn, like I can't learn 40 hours a week. Like it's impossible. I can learn really productively a couple of hours a week, and then like sometimes it's just like doing silly things and trying to find a way to motivate yourself. So like don't be too harsh on yourself, and like don't expect like 40 hours of amazing coding. Yeah, okay, people are looking for teammates, so if they might be away. Okay, let me see what other questions. Yeah, so Alexandra, what kind of advice would you give to so this is obviously a program for women and non-binary folks, so for people that have kids.
So yeah, that's kind of an issue right like top of my mind right now, because we've all been placed at home basically. Like the entire family is in this house, including the 6-year-old who is supposed to go to school from home. So it's like I mean, it boils down to basically making time for it somehow, as in like either you structure your day around kind of daycare times and whatever kind of private organization you can muster, do your evenings, depending on how you can do. But I mean, the moment kids come into the picture, it's kind of you have to muddle through and just do your best, basically. Yeah, going to. Yes, you could spend it on a babysitter, your scholarship. That's a good point. But so that you should just be mentally prepared that it will be intense and that you just have to cut yourself some slack in some areas, because it's just, you can't expect to do it all perfectly. So you can't be like the perfect parent and the perfect student and potentially work in addition to it, or meet your friends, or it's just like that is just not feasible. So you have to kind of prioritize what's important, but it's also just 3 months. So it's not like this is your entire life now. You have kind of a horizon of when this is done. But the most important thing is basically just like adjust your expectations. Your house will probably be more of a mess than it already is. And your kid's gonna run out of clean socks eventually, and then you have to like do an emergency laundry. All these things just happen, and instead of like beating yourself up about it being a bad parent or a bad like whatever spouse, girlfriend, you just have to muddle through. Basically, that's what I did. That's what I do these days. It's a lot of muddling through.
Muddling through. Okay.
Yeah. Improvisation is a skill.
Is key, yes. And I think as mothers, improvisation, multitasking, you're quite good at that already.
Yeah, but also, so I've been now on video calls, and I've also done that as a supervisor, where I had like the baby on lap, and that's just fine. It's fine. So if you just have to be open about it and transparent to the people you're working with, and if they should be cool with it. If they're not cool with it, they're probably the wrong people for you. So, yeah.
Yeah, so another question about the application, like more specifically. So another thing that I haven't mentioned yet, I think what could make your application particularly strong is also like your current community involvement. So because RGSoC is about open source and volunteers and all of that, it really helps if you can demonstrate that you are involved in meetups, or you are into volunteering or organizing, because that's also what makes RGSoC so successful. So like people that then graduate, like again preaching the gospel of RGSoC, and like you wanting to give back and teaching others. So if you have any kind of experience of talking or organizing, helping others, I think that is what could potentially make you stand out as well. Yes, question?
I just want to add, if you have children, you cannot be expected to also be running meetups, right? So that you should state that in your application, like saying that, okay, so I'm not currently involved in any kind of community activities because I'm having small children, or one small child, or whatever, or I have all these reasons, old parents, disabilities, whatever it is, because everybody understands that the ideal, like everything that is presented as the ideal way of contributing is like cut out for people who are single, or maybe with a partner, but not people with family and other obligations. So that is something that is definitely worth stating, because that explains why your application maybe looks a bit thinner in that term than than the other ones that have like plenty of free time that they can put into all the other things, while you simply don't.
But I would like to add that, like, your community involvement does not have to be tech meetup related. I would say anything that makes you stand out. Say like, okay, you can do talks, I don't know, in your church or anything. I don't know why I said church, but yes, church. Or like any kind of organizing party, or like anything that would demonstrate again that you are the type of a person that for open source,
things through,
and organized and motivated and all the things like that. So a good question. What's changed for you both after the program? So for me, what I like, the most kind of invaluable thing for me was working in a team, which again, when you're learning by yourself is very difficult. And like you would see all those job applications that say, oh, you need to know Git and pull requests and reviewing. Like, what? Am I supposed to review myself? I do that a lot, but like, so like that was for me, like just learning Git and GitHub was really, really cool. Then also like the idea of, like, for example, we would start a meeting with okay, these are the projects, like these are the goals. And they would say, okay, you need to do something in the database and you need to configure that, and like all those things in the beginning of the week would be like, I have no idea, this is impossible. But then as long as someone would break it down to you in like manageable tasks, something that you can start Googling and say like, oh, okay, so what they mean by database is I need to do this and change that. So like for me now, it sounds like now I had more mileage about like it's okay to approach something with completely zero idea, and then just maybe a couple of days later you'll be like, now I know how to do that. And like for me also, I learned how to take like notes, like, you know, like things that you figure out and you're like, that I will forever remember this because it's so useful, but then next day you're like, well. So like I started tracking things that I learned, like cool commands. I also started writing a blog, which was also good just to keep track of, you know, like on those shitty days that you're like, I was just Googling for 8 hours and I have nothing to show. You can at least say, okay, but I answered these questions and now I know this is wrong, and now I know this blog is really good, and the tutorials that this person makes are really useful for me. So that is still productive. So approaching problems, knowing nothing, and working in a team, including, and this is a skill I think that is useful as when you work as a professional, is like negotiating like different approaches and ideas, you know, like, because you want to do it like this and the other person is like, no, and then like trying to figure out like when to let go, when to convince someone, when do you feel strong enough and knowledgeable enough to go, and when to like just say, okay, this one's yours, just I'll follow you, you know, like, because we are a team, so try not to be more dominant or whatever. So that was very useful for me.
It's not funny.
Jonas.
Mamma, han kjefter på meg bare.
So talking about children.
Ikke trykker meg skikkelig.
Let me see, what other questions do we have?
See what I mean about muddling through. Sorry.
So, Alexandra, what changed for you? So, what did you learn from managing an RGSoC team?
Well, I think for me it was like one of the biggest learnings that I took away from 1 year specifically, where I had a team that was based in Kenya, is that in these global programs, you kind of have to question your own expectations. So it's like there were a lot of just cultural hiccups, I would call. It's like it wasn't really it didn't turn out to be a problem, but there were the approaches to things were just different, and my expectations were different to what they were thinking. So there was a lot of negotiation going on in that sense to understand where we were and like why certain things kind of felt off. So that was for me, personally, a very challenging situation, because I was just like in my own world, like this is how you do it, and this is the central approach, which was totally not true in their world. So there was a lot of learning that had to happen on both sides. I think that was the biggest learning for me, to just look at broaden my horizon in that sense. So that went both ways, obviously. That was one of the things. And then what I personally find very rewarding was like seeing the progress that the teams made, how fast they learned, how fast they improved, and how quickly actually both teams that I supervised went from being kind of insecure and careful to actually being able to do something, and seeing their kind of self-confidence go up, and with this feeling of mastery. So that's really rewarding for anyone who's working with this kind of program, to see like the progress that the teams make. That was pretty great.
Nice. Good. Yes. How about the payment? Does everybody get paid? So I think these are the details that probably will be different depending on where you live. But yes, this is a paid internship program. I think the payment is depending on where you live. So I think you can just like Google what's an internship. I don't know or like what would be good for you, like what would be acceptable for you. So obviously this is not going to be a Silicon Valley type of gig, but like, so for me it was like, what would be enough money for me to not like freak out and look for like freelance projects, to not worry about that. Like, so what would be enough money for me to not worry about money for a couple of months? So that is what I went with. But yeah, that's a good question. But it's definitely not something that will make or break your application, I think. Like, it's something that, as long as you're not unreasonable, I think the payment, I think you can, I don't know, negotiate it or something. I'm not sure.
They do have, or they used to have at least, extra teams that didn't get the sponsorship. Or a scholarship, but they got like the machine, as I call it. Like, they were in the system, but they were like bonus teams that couldn't get paid but still wanted to go through the program. Okay. So yeah, I'm not sure if that is still a thing, but it used to be like the 3 years where I was involved, that was the case.
Okay. So going back to just the prime criteria for selection of teams, I think it states already on the RGSoC website, but like I would say, so obviously you have to be 18 or older. If you're going for a full-time one, you need to dedicate at least 40, like be able to commit to 40 hours. So if you say, I'm working full-time and also I want to do this, I would doubt probably it, because it's like you'll die. It's just very intense. I would say community involvement, or any kind of sort of proof that you can self-organize, that you're disciplined and committed, that helps. A track record of self-studying for, so I think they say a year, but yeah, I think that's depending on what kind of curriculum you went through. Again, like if you've been doing 8 hours every day, I think you can do a lot in just 3 months. So then make just like a convincing case. Like, again, some things like it's easy to write things, but you need to write things in a way that they're supported, like with what you've actually done. So if you say, I'm interested in Python and I want to learn Python and I want to apply for a Python project, but then all your portfolio is something completely different, that is weird. So like just be consistent with like what you're saying and what you've done, because it's very obvious if you're not, because the idea is not for you to sell yourself, because no one's going to benefit from that. So like just try, and like I said, maybe this is not for you as well. Like I know people that just would never want to do that. Like they need the classroom environment and the peers and like maybe a bit of competition and stuff like that. But I would say that it is a very valuable experience. It's also something that you would benefit from. Like, so for example, now that I work full time, like a lot of my time is just me trying to figure stuff out and Googling and like self-discipline and all of that, that I also kind of some things I picked up in RGSoC. How to convince coaches. Okay, so
the coaches that I work with, they got basically support for their work. So they had that was part of their jobs, because they were working in places where they often use a lot of open source software. So that's one way of contributing back to the community. And like if we're being really cynical, it has also to do with building a hiring pipeline. So being in touch with people that might be potential new junior developers is definitely worth for them. So it's not like they do that. Most of them don't do it in addition to a full-time job. They do it as part of their full-time job. And so I would guess there's like a similar motivation for them than what I just described, with like seeing the progress in new beginners to like learn stuff. It's very rewarding to be part of that journey. And then there's like, they have support from work.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and like from my experience, so so I had quite like a good support network when I applied, because I was organizing meetups, so I knew a lot of coaches from there, and they were just, and like all the coaches that I meet there, they were just like nice people, and they, like I do, I find it now enjoyable to teach others, to explain things to others, to explain things well, to motivate people. So there's a lot of people that are they just want to do that, and I think it's incredibly rewarding when you deal with someone that is that self-motivated, because a lot of teachers deal with students that are quite passive and like, oh, you have to like learn this, it's important. And so when you're actually the person that's like, but teach me this and teach me that, and I want to know this, and like asking good questions, I think there is an immense amount of pleasure also that you can get as a teacher from having students like that. So, and I think that's why like the whole meetup community, it kind of works. It's all about volunteering, and it's peer-led, like people teaching, like, I don't know, I learned how to do this, I will talk about it in the meetup, you ask me questions, and like, so like keep passing on the knowledge. So yeah, if you do not have a coach in mind yet, I will check, definitely the first place I would go to is like your local meetup community. Maybe go to a couple of meetups, try to talk to some people, or ask around. I think also, so Twitter is great for the tech community. So I started my Twitter, I think, maybe like actively around RGSoC time, because you get a lot of tech people just hang out there for some reason, and it will be also beneficial for you later on, like when you look for a job and like you start to build your network. Yeah, meetups are cancelled, yes. That is also the reason why we're doing this online. True, you got me there. But
another thing might be looking at who has contributed to the project that you're thinking about like applying for, because they know both sides. So there might be they're at least already interested in the entire thing, and that might be much easier sell to go to them and say like, hey, I'm applying and I'm looking for a coach. Is that something you could do?
Yeah. So definitely be proactive. Like nothing is gonna just happen. You will have to kind of make things happen for you. But it's doable, and I think that's kind of one of the things that got me into the whole techie things as well. Is like I went to a Jungle Girls workshop. Like that was my first experience with anything programming, and it was just like contagious. Oh, that's a bad word for right now, but like just the people there, the coaches, the organizers, donating their time and expertise just because they want to give back. I think that's very, very common in the tech community. Okay, so I think
I have to read a bedtime story.
yes,
I have to wrap it up.
I think you are needed. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming, for asking questions. The Twitch stream I think is going to be available for 2 weeks, if I'm right. I did also try to record this, so I will maybe put it online somewhere. But yeah, thank you all, and yes, I
Good
wish
luck.
you successful RGSoC application. Thank you.
Good luck. Bye.
Bye.